Federal government ambitions in the auto sector are getting a bit of a scare. Car maker Stellantis has stopped construction of an Ontario electric vehicle battery plant.
A bump in the road has some workers fearing trouble ahead.
Well, that would be an economic disaster for this region.
It could go up in smoke.
Hi, welcome to About That. I'm Lauren Bird in for Andrew Chang. So one of the world's largest automakers has stopped construction on an electric vehicle battery plant in Windsor, Ontario. The $5 billion plant is a joint venture between Stellantis, the maker of Chrysler cars, and South Korean battery maker LG Energy Solution. The deal is the federal government's latest headache. It's being influenced by historic investments south of the border. But if this plant doesn't go through, it could have major impacts to Canada's electric vehicle strategy. The Stellantis deal. It was announced last March, and it was expected to create 2,500 jobs.
So the Government of Canada, $529 million investment or contribution to this project today will mean that thousands of workers, indeed, as the Prime Minister said, thousands of families will see the benefits of being part of the transition to an electric auto sector.
At the time, it was a huge investment from both the federal government and the province of Ontario. It was to try and help ramp up Canada's ability to build more electric vehicles. But now,
the multinational telling CBC News the Canadian government has not delivered on what was agreed to. So all construction related to the battery module production on the Windsor site has stopped.
According to Stellantis, the main issue is money. So what leverage does the automaker have to be able to stop construction at this late stage?
Industry watchers say the main reason Stellantis has made this move is because of a piece of legislation passed by the Biden administration, the Inflation Reduction Act.
The Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA. It was a bill signed into law by U.S. President Joe Biden in August of 2022. Among other things, it promised almost $370 billion for clean energy, including tax incentives and subsidies to encourage companies to make EVs and EV parts on American soil. Now, to be clear, the Stellantis deal was struck before the IRA came into effect. But once the Inflation Reduction Act promised money to build in the U.S., Stellantis wanted a reason to stay in Canada. And last month, it got a whopping precedent to point to, the Volkswagen deal.
So yes, this investment is a big one, but it is an anchor in the supply chains we're building. And like we've said, we're expecting the economic impact of the investment to be covered within 5 years.
That offer to Volkswagen, up to $13 billion in government subsidies, plus $700 million grant to build an electric vehicle battery plant in southern Ontario. The U.S. wanted it, but Canada put up a fight.
Everyone wanted this. So yes, we put up a lot of money that's going to come back in investments in economic activity very quickly.
And yesterday, there was another twist in this story. CBC News obtained a copy of a letter from the CEOs of Stellantis and LG Energy Solution. It's first reported on by the Toronto Star. Sent last month, dated April 19th, and it was a warning to Trudeau that Stellantis could scrap the Windsor plant if the Canadian government didn't match the Volkswagen subsidies. It reads, in part, "In the event our agreement is not promptly executed, we will be forced to make difficult decisions regarding this project and other respective investments in Canada in order to deliver on our commitments to bring new technology to the North American market." Automotive analysts say compared to the $13 billion Volkswagen is getting in subsidies, Ottawa's $500 million contribution to Stellantis is now chicken feed.
I read tweets and headlines that said, "Cough up the money, Trudeau, you did for Volkswagen."
The resources of the federal government are not infinite, and we are counting on Ontario to do its fair share, and we're counting on Stellantis to be reasonable.
We need the federal government to step up, as they did for Volkswagen. We need them to work with Stellantis.
And that brings us to now. With the future of the Stellantis plant unknown, it could spell trouble for the country's future EV investments. For more on all this, we brought in CBC News business reporter Kyle Bax in Calgary. Hi, Kyle.
Hi, Lauren.
Okay, so the IRA is having a really big impact here in Canada. Can you explain, what it means for Canadians and Canadian businesses?
Well, the first thing you have to realize is it's an enormous policy. We're talking
hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies. And it's not just EV batteries, it's building solar fields and wind farms. It's building biofuel production facilities, producing more hydrogen, transmission lines, all sorts of different facets, all aimed at reducing emissions and building up the whole clean energy sector. And it's so big that it caught a lot of world leaders by surprise. This is having ripple effects far beyond the United States.
And can you explain those ripple effects a little bit more?
Yeah, so this policy was really aimed in the United States. It's called the Inflation Reduction Act, but it's mainly just a big clean energy bill. It's trying to promote more manufacturing in the United States and trying to create more supply chains, bringing them back into the United States.
President Biden expected to celebrate the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. He signed the bill back on August 16th, touting it as legislation to help build an economy that works for working families and small businesses.
The largest investment in fighting climate change in U.S. history. Incentives involving electric cars and solar, and raising taxes on corporations, lowering the deficit.
But the ripple effects, you got to think about worldwide investment in some of these areas. If you are a company that's wanting to build an EV battery production facility, you can put that facility in many different countries. With the United States opening up the purse strings, dangling these huge subsidies, that's a big pull. And what it means is all these other countries are facing a lot of pressure because they now have to compete. They're feeling the pressure because they need to open these purse strings. And if not, they risk losing investment. And EV batteries, it's just one of those industries that a lot of countries, they want to attract that investment. That is a very attractive industry right now because it is in demand.
It's very important that we are in the business of the core products of the electrified automotive movement. Every jurisdiction in the world, including the one that we're sitting in and the one that we sell to in the US, is moving to all electric somewhere in the 30s, in the 2030s. And every jurisdiction is competing very heavily.
That's where the world is going right now. And so that's the pressure that we're seeing not only being put on Canada, but on Europe and lots of other countries around the world.
And so how is it affecting how Ottawa is investing in EVs right now?
Canada has kind of taken a different approaches to clean energy and also trying to reduce emissions to meet these climate goals, kind of like a carrot and stick approach. There always have been clean energy subsidies over the many years. And there's also been, the stick as well. And that's basically the carbon tax, trying to get some of these industries, like let's say the concrete industry or manufacturing or the oil patch, some of these big heavy emitters, trying to get them to reduce their emissions. So there's been the carrot and the stick. But what the United States has done has just dangled a very, very large carrot. And so if you're the Canada's federal government, you're having to rethink your strategy. How are you going to compete with that? And the federal government has admitted, when it looks at the IRA, the Americans' big clean energy policy, it has admitted that it can't compete with that, or at least right now, that it is not competitive with it. And so the federal government has to consider how much it wants to open up the purse strings, how much it wants to offer in terms of subsidies to try to attract that investment to Canada, and if not, risk losing it to the United States.
So what does this mean for the Stellantis deal and for other deals, like going forward?
These companies right now, especially if you're trying to, let's say, build batteries for EVs, you've got all the bargaining power. The United States has come out with this policy. And so if you're one of these private companies that wants to make a big investment in one of these industries, you can use that policy to compete, or to use that in your negotiations with Canada. You can use it in your negotiations with the United States. And so that's what we're seeing. If you are a company that's going to be making this big investment, you can go to the United States, what's being offered. And so that's what's happening at the bargaining table right now when it comes to, whether to come to Canada or to go somewhere else. What the United States is offering. It's a pretty lucrative package, and now you can try to get it from a different country and maybe even get a better offer.
Right, gives them lots of room to move around. Kyle Bax, thank you so much.
Thank you.